Okay, welcome to the special meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. Roger, can you run through the procedure for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Welcome.
Willie, you've gone on to mute, so we can't hear Roger.
Nope. Sorry.
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council, which is being held remotely in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governments in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the meeting chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise and turn off any smart speakers. Please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will appear on the screen when you're speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item, or move a motion or amendment, please use the meeting chat. The Chair will then invite me to speak when the relevant item is called. Where items are for noting, or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the meeting chat. Otherwise, the item will be agreed. Please would members not use the meeting chat for any other purpose, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the committee, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders will apply to the proceedings, and the terms of the Councillors' Code of Conduct will also apply in the normal way. Does any member have any queries regarding this procedure? There are no queries, Chair, so I will now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Mrs. Albert.
Thank you. Billy Sawyers.
I'm here.
Councillor Alexander.
I'm here.
Deputy Lord Provost Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Cordell.
Present.
Councillor Dawson.
I'm here.
Councillor Flynn.
Present.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Councillor Rendell.
I'm here.
Bailey Roberts.
I'm here.
Councillor Rome.
Present.
Councillor Ross.
I'm here.
Councillor Short.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
I'm here.
Bailey Keenan.
Present.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Present.
Councillor McCready.
Present.
Councillor McCurvin.
Present.
Councillor Malone.
Present.
Councillor Mara.
Present.
Councillor Richardson.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
Present.
Bailey Scott.
I'm here.
Councillor Hay.
Present.
Councillor Scott.
I'm here.
Bailey McPherson.
Hi, good afternoon, present.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Lord Provost.
Present.
Councillor Murray.
I'm here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call. All members are present.
Okay, if we could move on to the agenda, please.
The first item on the agenda is declaration of interest. Do any members require to declare a declaration? Councillor Dawson.
Thanks, Tracy. Just in relation to leisure and culture Dundee, I'd imagine that Councillor Roberts and others would want to do the same.
Thank you. That then takes us on to...
Sorry, just to make that declaration clear, Councillor Mara, the same, Leisure and Culture Dundee.
Yeah, we've got that, Councillor Mara, thanks.
Thanks, Willie.
We now move on to the agenda. I will pass over to the convener and will report there is one request for a deputation.
Members agreed to hear the deputation?
Agreed.
So the deputation is Mr. Pepper.
Mr. Pepper.
Mr. Pepper, you on the call?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Yeah, you've been to committee several times before, so you know the procedure. You've got up to 7 minutes to address the committee, and then if you can stay in case any members have questions. So on you go.
Okay, thank you. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Russell Pepper. I'm chair of Dundee Cycling Forum. First of all, I'd just like to say regarding the budget, we're just looking at the sustainable transport aspect of it. So first of all, we feel it's kind of rather vague to have a sustainable transport budget, as this accounts for buses, electric vehicles, cycling and walking. And there's no kind of breakdown as to how much is allocated to each of those modes of travel. We understand the reason for that is for greater flexibility, so that if and when opportunities arise, budget is more likely to be available. However, quite often this means that active travel takes a back seat to other, maybe politically or culturally more easy to implement infrastructure, such as electric vehicle charging stations. They're, of course, part of the solution for a sustainable city, but it's clear from all national guidance that the priority really should lie with active travel. So we therefore feel there's a greater need for transparency within the budget, with a breakdown to define amounts dedicated to walking, cycling, electric vehicles and buses. Maybe a commitment such as saying at least 50% of the budget ought to be for active travel projects, for instance, would allow for the flexibility that the department needs, whilst also firmly committing to active travel. The way the budgets are currently written is also rather inaccessible for the majority of people to grasp, so it's quite out of the reach of many people to even understand. And specific items and projects are often not detailed. So we would like to suggest that in future years, further detail is provided so that there's greater transparency around the way in which the council plans to spend its budget. With this particular budget, we would like to highlight one issue which we have, which is ongoing. And that is that for years now, we've been calling on the council to provide proper winter maintenance of cycle routes. In particular, the waterfront route between Monteith and Invergowrie, being as it is part of the national cycle network. This has not happened, however. All we've seen is that the route is now classed as a secondary footpath. It's also classed as remote because it can't receive incidental gritting from anybody gritting on the road. This means that in reality, it never receives any winter maintenance of any kind, and there are no plans for this to change. This past winter, we've seen particularly bad conditions with many injuries and the path being unusable for literally weeks. That is also true of pretty much all walking and cycling paths throughout Dundee during January. The council needs to proactively identify a core network of cycling and walking paths in the city, going far beyond the current priority 1 pavements on the winter maintenance schedule, including those which are remote, such as those through parks. And these then need to be provided winter maintenance with the same priority as main roads. It's incredibly important that if we want to be a sustainable, inclusive city, that walking and cycling are given at the very least the same priority as people driving cars. This will also help with the viability of the Dundee Active Travel Hub and ride-on schemes and any further cycling infrastructure that's implemented in Dundee. Despite this, we've been informed that the winter maintenance of the waterfront route is yet again not to be included within the budget for you this afternoon. We find this completely unacceptable, as to yet again subject active travel users to the dangers and inconvenience of treacherous paths completely flies in the face of the climate emergency and the council apparently adhering to the sustainable travel hierarchy, which is supposed to prioritise active travel ahead of motorised means. We've had a look at a comparable route in York, who performed a pilot gritting project on 11 miles of cycle route. The route in Dundee is about 9 miles. This cost York £42,000, including gritter vehicle hire. So that was entirely within their revenue budget. And we believe that a similar pilot could be undertaken here. In fact, Tayside contracts already have a very narrow pavement gritting vehicle, which would be suitable. We've been informed that external funding might be sought to undertake winter maintenance of the route, but again, this is totally unacceptable. If the council genuinely takes active travel seriously and as a valid form of transport and not just a fair weather leisure pursuit, essential maintenance really needs to be included in the budget, just as it is for car infrastructure. So we're therefore asking you today that the budget is only approved if it can be confirmed that it will include provision for winter maintenance to be undertaken along the waterfront route, whether this be as part of a pilot or to be fully included within the winter maintenance schedule, with the path being upgraded to a priority 1 footpath. Last year's capital plan included £11.35 million over 5 years for sustainable transport and infrastructure. If just half of that was dedicated to cycling infrastructure and then match funded by Sustrans, there would be £19 million available over 5 years, which would be sufficient to create the backbone of a Dutch quality cycle network around the whole city, utilising routes alongside the main roads. Such a network, however, would only be worthwhile with basic maintenance being undertaken, which would cost a fraction of the road's maintenance budget. With the budget before you today, the city could be transformed and Dundee could be a leading example in active travel, but without priorities changing, this will never happen. We think this administration does have that ambition, but it would be great to see it set out in black and white within the budget, which is where you see the true ambition of a city. Hopefully you agree and will be able to support people walking and cycling in Dundee by adding the condition of winter maintenance to the waterfront route to the budget today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for these comments. Bailey McPherson, I think you indicated a question.
Yeah, I did indeed, Convener, and thank you for that. Russell, I was just really wondering if you could give some more indication as to the costings that you've obtained from York City Council. My question is basic. How recently did they undertake this? And effectively what I'm really wanting to know is how recently did the £42,000 figure that I think you quoted for a stretch, it's just slightly longer, I think, than our waterfront route. How recently was that actually undertaken?
Just a sec, Fraser. I'm just finding a news article. 2019 was when they did that.
Right, so it's relatively recent. I would just make the point, Russell. I completely agree with your point. I had many complaints about the situation at Riverside, and it wasn't just cyclists; it was people walking as well on what the Road Maintenance Partnership referred to, as you rightly say, a remote footpath. It's an extremely well used footpath by active travel, both cycling and walking. I know that John Curran in the Road Maintenance Partnership is looking into the issue of the remote paths, but it will take funding. We've put 100,000 into our budget amendment. I'm very realistic about the likelihood of that winning a vote today. And I have to say, to the credit of you, Convener, and Councillor Alexander, we did discuss this very matter amongst others yesterday. And I know, you know, the council leader did make the point that the winter maintenance is very much demand led. But the bottom line on this particular aspect is, you're right, Russell, it never gets reached, never gets reached. And given, I can't comment for the area east of the city centre, but I suspect that's exactly the same. And I really do think it's something that we do have to give some cognizance to, both for cyclists and for pedestrians.
Thanks, Fraser. Do you want me to comment at all, or not, I suppose?
Looks like there may be a technical difficulty.
Yeah, looks like a Convener microphone problem by the looks of things.
Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us while we remedy the defect in the microphone.
She's done it again.
Yeah, but Ray, I can't see to. Ray had it a minute ago was perfect.
You should be live then.
Right. Sorry about that, colleagues. Just a little technical glitch. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. My question to the deputation is just how safe is it for cyclists to be out and using these paths when it is truly bad weather? So, I mean, the advice from at the moment is basically kind of stay at home, only go out if you need to go. And you know, there are people struggling to get to chemists and shops and you know, things that they need to get. So in terms of people cycling along what is essentially a tourist area at the waterfront, I'm just worried about the safety of other people using these paths if cyclists are out there in all sorts of weather.
I'm not really sure what your question is, but it's a main route that many people use for commuting, getting to work, going shopping, going about essential journeys. It also is a leisure route, obviously, but you're meant to get out once a day for exercise. So it is a route that is used by people for all uses. Are you saying it's not safe for them to be? They shouldn't be out cycling? I'm not entirely sure what you're
well, I would think, given you mentioned the weather last week and or the week before, the snow, and it was extremely bad weather, and I would have thought that taking a bike out to try and commute with a bike when weather's that appalling and cars and other things are going off the road is probably unsafe for the citizens. The other citizens maybe trying to get places they need to get, you know, their cyclists dashing about through the snow.
I think my point really is that if we have routes that are for active travel, for cycling and for walking, they ought to be cleared and given equal priority with roads. So you've got the roads were cleared within a couple of days easily when it was heavy snow. The cycle routes were not. Obviously, that kind of level of snow isn't usual here. What we usually see in a winter is ice. Same thing happens. All the roads get gritted. They're totally safe for people to drive along. Anyone with a car is getting around no problem whatsoever. But if you're cycling and you want to use the waterfront route, like I don't know, my girlfriend's boss lives in Montefieth. He works in Nine Wells. He comes along the waterfront route every day. He's not able to. He's not able to get to work by his usual method. So these routes are, you know, they are used by people for commuting and essential purposes, and they should be given equal priority as many roads.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Bailey Keenan, I think you were next to indicate.
Convener, it's more of a comment, and it's really to suggest that given that our budgets need it to be in by the 1st, and I haven't made provision for any of this, I would need to discuss it even further because I represent an area that I would consider to be the frozen north. But I realise that people like to go out walking and using more open space, and now that more people within the city are doing that, then I think that Mr Pepper makes a reasonable request, and I think it's probably something that we should take away for the future. I've often found the balance of or the walking on snow that's had some salt put on it and making it into some kind of slush is a bit more difficult than hard packed snow. So I think that these things need to be weighed up as well, but people are using more open space. So it's no unreasonable to think that we should consider something for the future. You know, there is real dangers in, you know, being on two wheels, I would have thought, in the adverse weather conditions that we've seen. But quite happy to discuss this further at some time as to how that budget's carved up in relation to active travel. But there is many constituents in my area that would certainly be looking for council to do better when it comes to the pavement outside their house.
Okay, thanks for that comment. I don't think there's really a question there. Councillor Alexander, you were next to indicate.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Russell. I think you've alluded to, and my colleague Bailey McPherson has also made reference to some of the conversations that we've had. And can I just say, very sympathetic to what you're raising today. And as someone that has got out on their bike, not as much as you, granted, but certainly been out on my bike a hell of a lot more over the last 12 months, I understand the issue that you're referencing. And I think you mentioned a point, and I'll come to a question, Convener, don't worry, which was in reference to the totality of the budget and making sure that that's reshaped to take account of cycling and walking routes. And I think, you know, as others have said, in terms of the budget provision that we've put in place today, we haven't included provision for additional funding, but I would certainly be looking, and I'll pick this point up with officers separately, to discuss with officers how we ensure that within the current budget that we recognise the issue that you reference, and where we are clearly on a journey of, you know, trying to encourage and increase the uptake of cycling and other, you know, means of transportation, including your legs, then we need to recognise that as well. So it's not always about additional funding, but actually reshaping current funding levels to recognise the issue that you raised. So would that be something that I think would go some way to address your point in terms of bringing that recognition?
I mean, yeah, if it can be included within the current budget, that's absolutely fine. We did receive an email yesterday from Ewan McNaughton that said it wouldn't be included and that there would be potentially, there was no guarantee about it, seeking external funding to provide the gritting or winter maintenance of the waterfront route. So if you could make it so that it would be included within the current budget, absolutely. That's something that we'd be, yeah, totally happy with that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further indications of questions. So Mr. Pepper, thank you for your contribution. You're welcome to stay for the meeting, but equally we won't be offended if you choose to leave at this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, if we can move on to the more formal part of the meeting, if you like. There's obviously a motion and 3 amendments. I'm under the impression these have been circulated to all members, and in which case we don't need a recess, but if others feel that they need time still to consider either the motion or the amendments, if they could let me know now, please. And we'll get them circulated by email just in a moment. I'm not seeing anybody indicating that they wish to have a recess to discuss anything. So on that basis, I will present the administration's budget. Over the past 12 months, Dundee City Council has faced some unprecedented challenges resulting from the global pandemic COVID-19. The pandemic, which we continue to live with, has had a significant impact on our city. I'd like to place on record my sincere thanks and appreciation to all council, health, third sector and all other workers in the city who've continued to provide key services over the past 12 months. With the vaccine programme now well underway, I hope we can look forward to a brighter future and build on our success as a city. The administration, as in previous years, has tackled the budget head-on and prepared a 3-year budget investing in our public services and infrastructure. The Dundee Partnership's City Plan for 2017-2026 was launched 3 years ago, along with the Council Plan. These documents show how working with our partners will continue to make Dundee a smarter, fairer, more vibrant and attractive city. The Council Plan focuses on tackling poverty and inequality, increasing job opportunities, improving the lives of young people, addressing health problems and creating stronger, safer communities. The Council declared a climate emergency in June 2019, followed by the launch of Dundee's Climate Action Plan in support of the transition to a net zero carbon and climate resilient future. The Council is committed to implementing measures to improve the carbon footprint of the city. In the last 3 years, the Council has spent over £60 million on a range of measures across all capital headings to tackle climate change, including investment in external insulation in our domestic stock, energy efficiency measures and photovoltaics in our buildings, continued the rollout of electric cars and associated infrastructure, commitments to implement a low emission zone and construction of flood protection measures. The Council also has a 10-year capital investment strategy setting out our long-term vision for investment in schools, green spaces, housing, smart cities and digital infrastructure, and last week approved a 5-year capital plan including investment of around £385 million over the next 5 years. In particular, I'm delighted that the capital plan includes the new £60 million community learning campus planned for 2025 to replace Brayview Academy and Craigie High School. The signing of the Tay Cities deal in December 2020 provides £300 million of funding from the UK and Scottish governments and sets out the scope of the city-region deal that seeks to transform the regional economy by delivering inclusive growth, raising the productivity of the region and increasing the participation of the workforce. City regional deal partners believe that this investment has the potential to secure over 6,000 jobs and lever in over £400 million in investment over the next 10 years, decisively reducing the economic inequality gap as part of the drive to boost productivity. During the year, we've continued the rollout of the 1,140 hours entitlement to early learning and childcare. We've continued partnership working at the Mitchell and Scotland Innovation Park, signalling a continued long-term commitment to Dundee by Michelin, Scottish Government and Dundee City Council. The park is an ambitious centre for innovation and skills, whereby industry and academia come together with a focus on sustainable mobility, clean transport and low-carbon energy. Good progress has been made on the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan on homelessness, and we plan to continue to invest in accommodation as well as deploying the Housing First model to meet the needs of people with complex needs. Clean travel is just part of our efforts to tackle climate change, which will be boosted by the Climate Leadership Group, bringing together leaders across the city to provide expert advice and support collaboration to deliver innovative solutions that contribute to a net zero future. Previous reports to committee have set out in detail the incredible scale and range of the work involved during COVID-19 of the Council, so I just want to highlight a few examples. The Lifeline assistance, which was provided to vulnerable citizens who had to shield due to health conditions, was invaluable. Thousands of calls were made, as well as deliveries of food, hygiene products and medicine. We've managed to keep essential services going, including, for example, refuse collection and social care. We rapidly redeployed Council and Leisure and Culture Dundee staff into critical social care and community support roles, with over 300 employees volunteering to support the Health and Social Care Partnership. Hubs were created within our communities which provided support for young people. I also want to mention the work of the registrars. Because of the need to register deaths, they've been almost the only employees in the city centre throughout the whole of both lockdowns as well as the recent severe weather. They've dealt with a difficult situation compassionately and efficiently, and have also conducted weddings, dealt sensibly with people whose weddings were cancelled, and caught up quickly with the huge backlog of birth registrations after the first lockdown. We've provided a whole range of services online, including youth engagement, support for ESOL learners and refugees, libraries, fitness classes and many more, but also found innovative ways to support people safely face-to-face. For example, a youth work programme about health and well-being in a community garden, and employability support delivered in parks and open spaces in local neighbourhoods to ensure young people didn't slip through the net. For businesses, the Council has set up systems to administer a wide range of grant schemes on behalf of the Scottish Government to assist sectors such as hospitality and non-essential retail who have been required to close or modify their operations or been impacted by the loss of footfall and restrictions on travel. By mid-February, over £38 million has been provided to over 4,000 businesses and self-employed people to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and we expect a further £5 to £7 million will be allocated by the end of March. We've paid our suppliers promptly. We've provided advice to businesses about compliance with coronavirus regulations, and we've developed projects to support traders such as the transformation of Union Street into a colourful, welcoming destination to make the city attractive when people can visit shops and cafes, and hopefully will soon be able to visit them again. This administration is proud to reflect on the support which has been provided to the city in the last 12 months. Whilst the Council continues to face considerable challenges, we have maintained our reputation as a well-run, high-performing, award-winning and ambitious local authority that delivers best value for our communities. This is reflected in the recent Best Value Review, which was completed during 2020. The proposed budget is a 3-year budget, with our savings proposals focused on year 21-22 and reflects our ambition to focus on a medium-term financial strategy. As with previous years, we've tried to minimise the impact of any savings through prudent financial management. In doing so, we've been able to identify base budget savings of around £4.3 million, significantly reducing the requirement for more difficult budget savings decisions and protecting our reserve balances. We've also made provision within our budget for staff pay awards in 21-22, reflecting the current pay assumptions from Scottish Government, and welcome the report being considered at committee next week around consolidation of the Scottish Local Government living wage into our pay and grading structure. We've increased funding for Leisure and Culture Dundee by £362,000. This continues our investment in our cultural facilities, and we've maintained our citywide cultural marketing budget of £100,000, which will continue to be used to promote our fantastic cultural facilities within the city. We've invested a further £150,000 to increase the resources within the Climate and Sustainability team, along with increasing the Protecting People budget by £100,000. The Health and Social Care Partnership has received an increase in funding of £2.4 million, which includes the full value of the new monies contained within the Scottish Government budget. The Health and Social Care Partnership last year received funding from the Council of £80.2 million. This year the funding provided is £82.6 million, and spending on children and family service rises from £194.6 million to £197.2 million. These are the two areas of service that the public consistently tell us are their priorities, and we've reflected this in our budget. We're continuing to invest £500,000 within the 21-22 revenue budget to support the delivery of the action plans in response to the Dundee Drugs Commission and the Independent Mental Health Inquiry. This funding demonstrates this administration's commitment to providing additional resources to support improving health and well-being outcomes for our citizens. In addition, we are providing £100,000 to continue to support the work of the Fairness Commission. The administration will continue to prioritise employment by directly creating opportunities where we can and providing assistance and support to people accessing work. We continue to work closely with our public and voluntary sector partners to help sustain jobs in the city and support growth of the social enterprise sector. We approach this year's budget with the overarching aim of protecting public services and maintaining our investment in city and council priorities, tackling poverty and inequality, increasing job opportunities, improving the lives of young people, addressing health problems, and creating stronger, safer communities. We've again published our budget proposals in advance of today's meeting, giving councillors, staff, trade unions and the wider public the opportunity to review our proposals in detail. The support of our officers is critical to ensuring the success of the Council's work, and we thank them for their ongoing support to help us achieve our aims. Thanks are also due to those elected members who have played an active part in what has again been a very challenging budget process. After allowing for the savings proposed this afternoon, our spending proposals for the next year amounts to £372.9 million. This expenditure provides the revenue necessary to fund our ambitious capital spending programme, approved in February 2021, and will provide the resources to deliver vital services for the people of Dundee. I now submit to this committee the administration's 2021-22 revenue budget to set a council tax band D of £1,379. Do I have a seconder for the administration budget, please?
Yes, please.
Councillor Short.
Yes, can I second you, please, convener?
Thank you for that. So we have 3 amendments, and I'm going to take them in the order in which they were circulated to elected members. So, Bailey McPherson.
Thanks very much, Convener. And like yourself, I would like to thank the officers for all their assistance during this process, in particular the Chief Executive, Sandy Flight and George Manzie and the finance team, who have been exceptionally efficient, and officers right across the various departments with the various questions that we've all had. I think you touched, Convener, on the fact that the overall revenue budget is £372.9 million this year. The difference between yours and ours is the grand total of 1.5 million different. Quite honestly, 0.4% different, and the other amendments are of similar ilk. In fact, I think one of them is a little bit less than that, and I think it just goes to show the point that there's a great deal of unanimity on the large areas of local government spend amongst all the members of the council. As you know, Convener, I wrote to your own group, to the Labour group and the Conservative group, suggesting that in advance of the budget meeting, the groups meet to discuss our various proposals, because when we get to this formal position, we know the outcome. We know the administration has an effective working majority, and your budget will win the vote today. But we feel it's quite important, even if we don't change somebody else's budget, we have a chat about the key issues that are important to each of our groups. And I'm very grateful, and I'm genuinely grateful, Councillor Duncan and I, to both yourself and Councillor Alexander for putting off time with us yesterday to discuss these. And I'll cover some of these particular issues, which are the highlights of, if you like, our amendment that is before committee this afternoon. I'm a bit disappointed with the other groups not doing so, and I would really ask, because I'll repeat the request for 22-23, so there's 365 days notice, folks. I think it's a good thing to do. I don't expect another group to roll over and simply accept what a group that's the grand total of 2 out of 29 councillors wants for everything. I don't expect that at all. But we want to make our contribution to the debate, and I think it's useful. And we've seen this to the credit of the group leaders across the council. We've met very regularly during the COVID health emergency. It's been extremely positive, extremely collegiate, and that's the way I think we should go going forward. A large part of our amendment is in relation to neighbourhood services. Environment management has seen significant staffing reductions since 2015, and the number of posts lost in the past 6 years amounts to over 50 posts. Our particular concern is around the loss of manual street sweeping posts, and that's now well over 30 of these 50 posts. The remaining of the posts that have been lost are gardeners, ground maintenance operatives, seasonal leisure attendants, and so on. We feel very strongly that there is a need to tackle the issue of street cleaning. I think the staff do an excellent job. We genuinely feel there ain't enough of them. And I'm going to read very briefly from a letter I received in the post today from a constituent who writes as follows. I'll not read the whole thing. She says, I'm sitting reading the article in this morning's, that would have been yesterday's, Courier, and would just like to say how much I agree with the need to have more street cleaners. I feel that having done a lot of walking over the last 12 months during the COVID emergency, the rubbish on the streets is just awful. Now, I'm not in any way criticising the staff. They are excellent, but we feel very strongly that there is a need to look again at the number of street sweeping posts. Now, what we would in the administration budget envisages another 5 posts going. We would not do that. We would retain these posts, and we would create another 10 on top. We had a useful debate with yourself, Convener, and Councillor Alexander, And whilst we know perfectly well the outcome of the vote today, what we would very much like to just leave on the table, if you like, is the suggestion that around 6 years on from the review that happened, which had, I have to say, to be fair, it had a lot of good things in it. You know, it's not all bad, but we feel certainly in terms of staffing that there's a job to be done there. But without any sort of preconditions, we feel that some form of member officer, short life working group or something like that would be worth considering to look in the whole area of environment management. Now, you made the very reasonable point, in fact, I think it was Councillor Alexander, that you would want to consult with Councillor Rendell as convener. That's perfectly correct, perfectly right. But we just feel that there's a need to really look at this area. In terms of other areas that we are tackling, Councillor Duncan, who will second me, will cover some of them. But we feel that we don't want to take the cuts in relation to the Helm project, which we feel provides a very useful, creative and supportive learning service for people who find barriers in developing a career. We are not against, in terms of Report 109/2021, which is a support to children, young people and families. As I explained to you both yesterday, we're not against the concept of the functional family therapy. We're quite concerned about the amount of money that comes out of it, and we would certainly welcome a briefing in relation to what's planned for the future. We would spend a bit more on the Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership than yourselves. Somewhere in the order of just over £250,000, and we would reiterate that we are very, very keen to see the drop in service. I think some of the media this week has been a little bit unhelpful, because I think there's some cross-party consensus on the 24-hour crisis centre issue. I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious that there's 2 other amendments to go. So at that, I will thank you for the committee's time. And Councillor Duncan will second me.
Fiona McPherson, thank you for that. We will look into the issue of streetscape and come back to members about that, and we'll certainly ensure that Mr Clancy and his team arrange, assuming that these proposals are successful, which you seem to do, we'll arrange for Mr Clancy and his team to provide briefings in terms of the 2 reports on children and families. Councillor Duncan.
Thanks, convener. Obviously very happy to formally second Bailey McPherson, and I'd also like to echo his remarks about the very useful meeting we had yesterday with yourself and Councillor Alexander. And I think it's probably fair to say that in these terrifically challenging times, most people, most citizens of this city would actually look to all politicians of various parties to actually get together and at least try to talk through the issues, and in other words, to be like the adults in the room and try and help us all through these very difficult times. So we're certainly up for more of that, and I hope others might be in future too. So briefly, to hark back to the deputation at the beginning of this committee, our budget, amongst other things, would actually provide the money to tackle winter maintenance for remote footways and cycle paths. We've actually, and I'm sure other people recently have heard a lot from residents about, a desire to see more in the way of gritting, snow clearance and general winter maintenance. Obviously, it's been a challenging winter on top of everything else. The other area that we would like to devote more resources to, something like £2 million on top of the existing capital budget, would be on roads and resurfacing. Again, another area that I'm sure all of us get lots and complaints and suggestions about, and I know a lot of residents would certainly appreciate more resources going into that direction. The other thing I'd like to mention briefly, we certainly had in our budget, we were not going to increase school meal charges. And I'm very pleased to note that the administration is now minded in that direction too. I mean, I think, again, that's a great help and relief to families struggling through these difficult times. The only other areas that might be worth a mention is, we would not increase preschool education charges. We would not increase lease charges for parks and open spaces, amongst other things. So on that basis, I would commend this budget to you.
Okay, Councillor Duncan, thank you for that. Councillor Rendell, I think you were the next to
Thank you, Convener.
interest in speaking.
Yeah, I'll just put my video back on. Yeah, thank you, Convener. It was just to say that I have sympathy with Bailey McPherson's comments about, you know, the street scene work. I'm constantly on the phone to officers with, you know, problems with fly tipping and rubbish in the street. But I hope Bailey McPherson would agree it's actually the behaviour of people that needs to change as well. People have been at home a lot, obviously, over the past year, and that seems to have created more rubbish. We've managed to carry on in the main with the refuse collections, and I think the service has done a sterling job there. We only had to stop the food collection for a short time and the special collections for a short time. But there is pent-up demand for people recycling stuff, and they seem to be dumping it in places that it shouldn't be dumped. So I think we need to look at educating people in their area, and we've been talking at the various community forums that we have about, you know, people that are willing to go out in their own street and just cover their own area with the voluntary litter pickups. Now that doesn't solve, you know, the problem, but it will help, I hope. And I'm very happy to look at speaking to officers to discuss a short-term working group as to how we might address these issues. And I was also interested to see in the press recently that maybe technology is going to be able to help us in the future, because I don't know if you saw on the news last night about the litter cam, the artificial intelligence that is going to help with identifying those who are dumping rubbish out of their cars, for example. So I'm hoping that in future we will continue to look at ways that technology can help us. But thank you for all your comments, Bailey McPherson, and I'll definitely take them on board. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Rendell. Councillor Alexander, I think you're next.
Thanks very much, Convener. Obviously, I'll be supporting your budget proposals, but again, can I just take a quick opportunity to thank Bailey McPherson and Councillor Duncan for their time yesterday. I think that kind of pragmatism is really helpful when we're having these discussions, and whether or not we agree today, I think we all see the merit in each other's proposals. And it might just be the way in which we deliver those that we disagree on. And I think, you know, Fraser, you mentioned the 0.4% of disagreement, and perhaps it would be better turning it on its head and saying the 99.6% of agreement, certainly. And I remember that I carried out the same calculation a couple of years ago during a budget meeting. And I think it's fair to say that there is a huge degree of unanimous support for the broad thrust of the proposals within our budget and the others as well. The one area, I suppose, that there is an element of concern in terms of all opposition budgets is just in reference to some of the one-off savings. Now, we all have a degree of one-off savings, it's fair to say, including the SNP budget, but it's the additional element, you know, £750,000. And given our experience over the last year in terms of dealing with, you know, a situation that we never necessarily ever predicted would land on our shores, I think we've got to be mindful of the challenge that is still ahead of us. And again, that gives me a little bit of concern. And so on that basis, I wouldn't be supporting your budget proposals, Bailey McPherson, but really appreciate your contribution. And again, I think there's some other conversations that we want to take forward in any event. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander. I'm seeing Bailey Keenan.
Yeah, just a question. I wonder if officers can give us some indication of what the balances would be in uncommitted reserves in areas such as the insurance fund, the repairs and renewals fund, and the change fund, as well as the general fund balance. And if they can give an indication as to, I think you made reference in your speech, Convener, about additional money that will be with by the end of March. If officers could detail that, because my understanding from them was it would be that particular fund would be somewhere in the region of 14 million, based on the various funds that will be released to deal with COVID issues.
Well,
but we are dealing with COVID issues when we're looking at the budget. So if I could have these figures, that would be useful.
We're in the midst of a formal budget debate, and we're not taking questions to officers, as you well know, having attended many budget meetings. Councillor Hunter, you are next.
Yes, thank you, convener. First of all, before I make my substantive comment, I just want to join you in thanking officers, and Bill McPherson did it as well, and thanking officers for all the work and support they did for the budget. I know it's never an easy process for them as well, so their professionalism and diligence is very much appreciated. And I also want to associate myself with the remarks that you made, thanking all our staff over the last year, which has been particularly difficult. It was really just, I was debating whether to come in or not, just the comments that Billy McPherson made about the saving and children families, in particular the support for children, young people with families. And I actually do appreciate the comments he made, that it's not so much that he's doesn't want to see what's going ahead. He wants some more information, and I fully appreciate that. And it certainly was my intention, because some of the savings that is in this report is linked to the 2 reports that are coming to children and families on Monday night. And it certainly was my intention that we'd have briefings after that for elected members. So more than happy to have briefings on these particular proposals as well. But I think it is important to point out that what that saving is about, and what that proposal is about, is actually helping some of our most vulnerable young people in the city, particularly those who are needing respite. And I think it's fair to say that we've not quite got respite right over the last few years. And I think this proposal goes a long way to actually improving respite for some of our for families who really need that support and help. One of the reasons why I think it's an important policy to keep in place. So although I understand Billy McPherson has reservations, and I think it comes from a place of wanting to work together to make sure we're doing the right thing, I couldn't support taking that saving out or taking that policy out, because I think it really is important for our young people and their families that we continue to do that. So, but happily to continue that work with elected members to ensure that we have got this absolutely right, and that's the reason why I will remain supporting the proposal that's in our proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. I'm not seeing any more indications at that stage, so I think, Tracy, if we could go to the vote on this amendment, please.
The motion by Bailey Sawyers, seconded by Councillor Short, is as circulated. The amendment by Bailey McPherson, seconded by Councillor Duncan, has also been circulated. Bailey Sawyers.
Motion.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Deputy Lord Provost Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Cadell.
Motion.
Councillor Dawson.
The motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Lynn.
Motion.
Councillor Rendell.
The motion.
Bailey Roberts.
The motion.
Councillor Rowe.
The motion.
Councillor Ross.
Motion.
Councillor Short.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Bailey Keenan.
No vote.
Councillor Cruikshank.
No vote.
Councillor McCready.
No vote.
Councillor McIrvin.
No vote.
Councillor Malone.
No vote.
Councillor Mara.
No vote.
Councillor Richardson.
No vote.
Bailey Wright.
No vote.
Bailey Scott.
No vote.
Councillor Hay.
No vote.
Councillor Scott.
No vote.
Bailey McPherson.
The amendment.
Councillor Duncan.
Amendment.
Lord Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Murray.
The amendment.
We have 15 votes for the motion, 3 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried at this point.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. So the next amendment that was circulated to members was from the Conservative group. So Bailey Scott.
It's actually Councillor Scott, convener.
Oh, Councillor Scott, to move.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, convener, I'd like to join with you and other group leaders in taking this opportunity on behalf of the Conservative group to thank council staff for their work over this last very challenging year. I know that in many cases they've gone the extra mile to help the citizens of Dundee get through this crisis, and of course we are very grateful to them for doing that. I'd also like to thank the Council's finance team for their help in producing our amendment. We recognise that officers have been busy trying to get the Council's own budget in order, as well as dealing with the ongoing COVID crisis. So we didn't want to take up too much of officers' time in developing our budget amendment. For this reason, we have limited our extra expenditure and savings plans. I'm not going through the budget volume looking for small savings that would have taken up officers' time disproportionately. Now, as a group, we always look to limit any increase in council tax. However, this year, of course, we haven't had to do this, since in line with the rest of the country, the administration has chosen to go for a standstill council tax. Now, while we're grateful that the Scottish Government has made this extra funding available, we recognise that it has only been able to do so as a result of the record funding that it's received in its own budget from Westminster. However, despite a 9% increase in the SNP government's budget, Scotland's councils will still actually see a rise of less than 1% for their day-to-day funding. And there can be no doubt that we will be back here again next year, scrabbling around for savings to balance the budget, especially if the extra money to allow local authorities to set a zero increase in council tax this year isn't baseline for future years. The case for a fair funding deal, a Barnett formula for councils, if you like, is becoming an imperative, and I hope that other parties will follow the Scottish Conservatives in proposing such a policy, as COSLA has already done. What we're seeking to do in the proposals we're putting forward today is to plan for the city's post-COVID recovery. Once the restrictions are over, it's going to be a long, hard slog for us all to get back to some kind of normality. The High Street in particular has suffered a severe hit, particularly those smaller retailers in our district shopping centres, so we need to encourage more people to shop local. That's why after lockdown is lifted, instead of putting back the charges in our district car parks, we think the council should waive them until the end of the year, as our neighbours in Angus have done. We recognise the Christmas period is going to be more vital than ever this year for our retail and hospitality sectors, so we're also calling for free parking in all city centre car parks in the 3 weekends before Christmas, as they've successfully done in Perth in recent years. We also want to establish what we're calling a city centre, district centres COVID recovery fund, which the city development team can use to fund further initiatives to promote and enhance the city centre and the 5 district centres. We're sure there are plenty of ideas that can be utilised by officers to put this money to good use. If we're going to get people out and about again post-COVID, we also need to ensure that our roads and pavements are up to scratch, which is why we think it would be a good investment to spend an extra £1 million on resurfacing schemes, especially after the recent period of snowy weather that has helped to further degrade the standard of our carriageways. As has been widely reported at our meetings in recent months, there's a funding black hole facing Leisure and Culture Dundee. So we propose an additional £200,000 be added to the organisation's management fee to help mitigate against any cuts it might have to make to the services it provides, such as libraries and sports centres. When we propose our yearly budget amendments, we're always mindful of not indulging in some of the more unrealistic proposals put forward by other opposition parties. And this year is no different. And unlike the Labour and Lib Dem proposals, most of our spending proposals will drop out of the system once we're through the pandemic, with the only recurring cost going forward being the revenue associated with the increased capital spending on roads and pavements. We also haven't robbed Peter to pay Paul by taking from one spending department and giving to another. Convener, we believe that our proposals will help the city recover from the nightmare of the last year and are costed and deliverable. I would urge members to back the Conservative Group's amendment this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Before I call your seconder, could I remind members that if they're not speaking, could they please remain on mute, because there was a wee bit of sort of background noise going on there, unless Philip's got a dog or a washing machine or something going in the background. So we have Councillor Hay to second.
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to second this Conservative Group amendment to the budget. We are, of course, facing difficult and challenging times ahead caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on businesses. We're very concerned on how this will impact on small local businesses and the effect business owners, livelihoods, and the staff they employ. As a consequence, we brought forward some measures to help city centre and district shopping centres. And as Councillor Scott's outlined, we will be moving that there should be free parking in the district shopping centres from April to December. We have also included free parking for the city centre for the 3 weekends prior to Christmas to encourage extra footfall into the city centre shops. We've provided a city centre district shopping centres COVID recovery fund, which has £350,000 in it. This fund is to help support local businesses to get through these difficult times. We understand that Leisure and Culture Dundee are projecting a 21-22 deficit of approximately 3.75 million deficit, and in 22-23 a deficit of 1.87 million. Whilst I know that in the administration's proposals there are additional funding for this, we still feel that an additional £200,000 would help mitigate some of the savings that would be forced to be made to help support our local libraries and leisure centres, which provide such important services to our local communities. I commend this budget to you, and I would ask you all to support it. Thank you.
Sorry, Bailey Scott.
Sorry, Convener, I haven't indicated at this time that I wish to speak.
All right, okay. Technical gremlin, no doubt. Do we have any other indications? Members wishing to speak at the moment? Councillor Alexander.
Thanks for indulging me again, Convener. I think there's always areas of merit in opposition budgets, and again, I think whether or not they are taken as part of this budget process, there's an ongoing conversation to be had. We're very mindful as an administration of the economic recovery of the city, particularly around the district and city centre aspects. Now, your focus as part of this budget has been on parking. You'll be aware that in the capital programme that we have recently agreed, there was more than £2.5 million set aside over the coming years, specifically for that kind of city centre improvement fund. And the ambition of the administration extends further than that, and I hope to be able, along with colleagues, to bring further proposals and outline our ambition for the future of the city centre and district shopping centres over the coming year. And I think it's just to acknowledge that point, that this is certainly not a once and done in terms of the approach and the issues that are raised. And we will continue to look at areas of improvement and to bring forward spend where we can, to ensure that we're not only acknowledging the health and the well-being of the city, but the economic prosperity of the city going forward. So with all of that said, I will remain backing your own motion, Convener.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that. So I'm not seeing any further indications. So if we could just go to the vote, Tracy, please.
The motion remains as previous, moved by Bailey Sawyers, seconded by Councillor Short. The amendment this time is by Councillor Scott and seconded by Councillor Hay. Bailey Sawyers.
Motion.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Deputy Lord Provost Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Cavell.
Motion.
Councillor Dawson.
The motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Lynn.
Motion.
Councillor Rendell.
Motion.
Bailey Roberts.
Motion.
Councillor Rowe.
Motion.
Councillor Ross.
Motion.
Councillor Short.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Bailey Keenan.
No vote.
Councillor Cruikshank.
No vote.
Councillor McCready.
No vote.
Councillor McCurlin.
No vote.
Councillor Malone.
No vote.
Councillor Mara.
No vote.
Councillor Richardson.
No vote.
Bailey Wright.
No vote.
Bailey Scott.
Amendment.
Councillor Hay.
Amendment.
Councillor Scott.
Amendment.
Bailey McPherson.
No vote.
Councillor Duncan.
No vote.
Lord Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Murray.
Motion.
We have 16 votes for the motion. For the amendment, the motion is carried at this point.
Okay, thanks for that. Gaelic Keenan.
Okay, convener, thank you. Convener, like yourself, I'd like to pay tribute to the hard work and effort that key workers have put in, right from shop workers to the council staff and to health workers, health and care workers. The efforts have put in have been excellent and have kept people in their home and kept people safe. I think we should acknowledge that a lot of people throughout this pandemic have lost their lives, and that sort of loved ones haven't had the opportunity to obviously grieve as they would, or say goodbye to loved ones as they would. Some of that being having to be done over a video link is now overly dignified. It's a sad reflection of what this pandemic's done and how it's tore things apart for people and families and life. So, you know, I think at some stage, perhaps as I've suggested, and the Lord Provost has agreed to, that the council need to mark that once we're in a better position and come through it. But leading on to the budget, I think as well that I acknowledged the effort that the other political groups have put in, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. But unfortunately, seeing them yesterday and being short of time, didn't see the merit in having a conversation, because there was quite considerable differences in between what we propose and what they propose, although some things within there are very much the same, trying to get the economy moving. Obviously, when it comes to cleaner streets, then obviously a dog warden and stopping the dog fouling that goes on. But our proposals are fundamentally looking to support health and social care. We don't believe that as yet we're out of a pandemic, and that there is mutations and the like. If we were out of a pandemic, given the numbers that we were in, Dundee would have moved to tier 1 some considerable time back. It may well be creeping back up again, but the numbers would have been down enough and things would have been back to normal. Some of the restaurants and bars would have been back open, but they are not. So there's obviously some considerable fear in government's mind in opening up the country. So I really think that in health and social care, we need to make that difference. We would leave the money in health and social care, as we believe there has been a number of issues in health and social care, people going into nursing homes, the issues that have been addressed, the additional resource that is needed, additional money that's needed to go into PPE and nursing care, is just merits the fact that there is much to do to make changes to social care. And I think the whole of social care needs to be looked at. And of course, the city has a commitment to a drugs and alcohol crisis centre, and taking that money out would put that in some level of doubt, as we read in the paper the other day. Could be some couple of years away before it's on it. This would put money into place to make that happen soon. We believe that in health, everything in health at the moment seems to be some level of it's your right. So we would engage a health rights officer so as to help people, in particular families, such as the ones that were involved in giving evidence to the Drugs Commission, that being that they often found it very frustrating to get people the care that they need, or their loved ones the care that they need. And health rights would be able to keep them right on that particular thing, point them in the right direction of how they would open the doors to that level of healthcare. So I think it's important that whilst everything is rights-based, that we expand our welfare rights team to have that specialist in health. We would also, in looking for improvement in health and social care, look to a quality improvement officer, and that being to try to drive up the standards across nursing care in the city, nursing homes in the city. Some of the HMI reports that we've seen see standards dropping, if anything, and they're not making the grades that they should. We should expect the best for our city, so we should put money in there to make sure that that happens. We look towards the growth and the future growth in the city, and therefore suggest someone to develop and grow the business and commercial waste for the city. We believe that that position would become self-financing, and that it would go a long way towards generating a greater income as within the partnership agreement that exists between Derryl and our Dundee Energy Recycling and ourselves. So there is a need for to try to grow that business, and I don't suppose that anyone should be in a position to be able to take commercial waste in there at a rate cheaper than the City Council is, given that we're in partnership with the organisation. So there is a potential growth of business there, and we need to look at things in the round to see if we could generate a decent income for council going forward, because in previous years the money hasn't come forward for government to make that level of difference. Again, we'd say dog warden, we're here in the streets. Billy McPherson made reference to obviously getting calls from people, but certainly dog fouling is a real issue, and I've seen articles in the press obviously on that, with politicians suggesting it's something that needs to be addressed, and this one goes a long way towards doing that. Acknowledging the fact that that we're using open space more, I'm suggesting that we engage 2 countryside rangers. These countryside rangers would very much do the work that was previously done by them, looking into areas such as bringing wildlife back into the areas of the city, and of course working with schools, helping deliver the curriculum when it comes to the environment. With leisure and culture, we would give an additional 350,000 to leisure and culture. This would be delivering a leisure pass to young people in our schools, and at the same time looking towards the economy of that business and looking to boost the economy there, so as it would get the thing kick-started and back to some kind of normality. Very much other proposals that have been made try to do that. This one does it, stirs the money around our own pot, gives it with one hand, but it's expecting the doors to be open for our school children to be in there using these facilities. When it comes to digital devices, this is figures from council officers. The figures for council officers are that it is 75,000 would buy with 6,150 digital devices. That's something that's badly needed for our children in our schools if we're to move forward with education and make a real difference. There is many digital devices that have been bought. This takes it the next step further. It's officers that are saying that's the number we need. So that's what we've built into our budget. And the other thing would be another £12,000 for digital recording equipment. I can't remember which one of the administration raised the question with officers in relation to that just recently when we discussed antisocial behaviour, but noise being the biggest nuisance, we're looking for that to be addressed and see whether we can address antisocial behaviour going forward. So we'll listen to what was said by the administration and look to put money in there to address that. So I'm hoping that you see fit to adopting this budget and, you know, taking on board what's been said. It's about boosting the economy and leaving money in health and social care and delivering the educational devices for our children. Thank you.
Kieran, thanks for these comments. Can I say on behalf of the administration, and I'm sure on behalf of all members, that we would absolutely endorse the need, when it's safe to do so, obviously, for the council to be holding some sort of event to recognise the above and beyond the duty work that staff and volunteers have put in over the past year. Councillor Malone, I think you were coming in to
Yes,
second. Is that correct?
yeah, I'm delighted to second Bailey Keenan's motion on behalf of the Labour group. I think that what we've heard, I think there's consensus across the chamber, probably a consensus I haven't seen since becoming a councillor, where we actually recognise the work that's been put in by council officers, the council staff, frontline staff, and key workers every place. But I would also like to commend, and I'm sure everybody else would like to commend, the valuable work that's been done by the voluntary sector in Dundee. We've seen people who've been engaged in projects around food poverty, which in this day and age shouldn't be an issue, but the COVID crisis exacerbated that, and the work that's been done by voluntary groups in terms of food poverty has been nothing but exceptional. So I'd like to also have them commended. I think what Billy Keenan has done is put forward an amendment which looks at certain areas which we all regard as being critical coming out of COVID. The end of COVID will not be the end of the crisis. In many respects, it will be the start of a crisis, particularly in areas like mental health. We know that there's an increased awareness about mental health issues in the city. We know there's an increased awareness about drug and alcohol, and we know that that won't go away when COVID ends. So I think it's immensely sensible that we start to look at supporting those services that provide support and care for people who are suffering from mental health and drug and alcohol problems. I think also it's brought an awareness about the information that's available to citizens of this city when it comes to their health rights. And I think the appointment of a health rights officer, I think, is again something that augments the service. It doesn't take away from the service, or it doesn't challenge the service or question the service. It improves the service for the citizens of the city. And also there's a lot of lessons we've got to have learned from COVID, and I'm sure everybody across the chamber is keen to learn those lessons when it comes to care provision in the city. So I think anything, again, that adds value to that augments the value of that in terms of the quality officer that we're suggesting, that can look at care provision across the city, not just council care provision, but private care provision as well, and give us an update and give us more reports so strategically we can look at the challenge that's facing the care sector. In terms of, I'm not going to rehearse the discussion about cleanliness in our streets. I think Bailey McPherson mentions about the litter and the need for additional road sweepers. Bailey Keenan has mentioned the dog fouling. I mean, I would be minded to kind of support both of these if I could, but at the end of the day, I've got to look at the one that concerns my constituents most, and that definitely is dog fouling. Particularly over the last few months, as more and more people have been out with their dogs, some of our streets, some of our pavements are almost inaccessible because of dog fouling. I think the idea of the countryside rangers is first class, and I would ask people to think about this in the context of what our ambitions for in this city of getting people to be involved in more exercise. But additionally, park rangers can be the eyes and ears on the ground when it comes to the maintenance of our green space. And we've only got to look at recent newspaper headlines and newspaper articles about vandalism to our green space. And I think that what, again, we should be doing is strengthening the provision and the opportunities for green space. And I think the wardens would do that. I think the idea for the leisure scheme pass doesn't just look at how we invest in the management of the leisure and culture, but actually how we, again, enable citizens, particularly our children, to access many of these facilities, which often they're priced out of. So I think the active pass does two things. It provides that accessibility, but it also creates a multiplier effect where the money that's been put into being used and put into leisure and culture will actually find additional value elsewhere. And finally, sorry, two more things if I may, Convener. I think the digital devices for all, again, COVID has demonstrated there is an accessibility issue and there is a digital divide. And again, at the end of COVID, what we know is that the more we use immersive technologies in education, the more there'll be a requirement to have more sophisticated technology. If we're going to be investing in technological literacy in the city, we've got to keep this as an ongoing project, not as a one-off because COVID disrupted the way we learn. The way we learn, the way our children learn will change going forward, and we have to be at the forefront of providing support and infrastructure for them. And finally, I echo Councillor Bailey Keenan's point about antisocial behaviour. For the last two safety committees we've seen, there is a significant problem in this city. The most significant problem when it comes to antisocial behaviour is noise. And I think giving the antisocial behaviour team some additional resource to try and tackle that, to try and measure it, to try and give us an understanding of how significant this problem is to the lives of our citizens is important. So I'm more than happy to support Bailey Keenan in seconding this this amendment, and I would urge others to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malone. Councillor Rendell, I think you were next to indicate.
Yeah, thank you. It was just a couple of comments around the things that have been said about neighbourhood services. The dog warden, I'm afraid I don't agree that another dog warden would in any way help to solve the dog fouling issue. It's the same as I said to Bailey McPherson. It's an issue of behaviour. As a dog owner myself, I'm afraid I think I can count on the fingers of one hand the amount of times I've actually seen somebody doing this. And on 2 occasions, I asked them and said, I have a spare dog bag if you wish, and I'll not tell you what the comment back was. But I don't see that having an extra dog warden is going to help that, because I think the vast majority of this dog fouling happens kind of out of sight, either early in the morning or at night, when you're not seeing it. So I just don't think that would help. I think it's more an education process for the people who are committing the bad behaviour. In terms of countryside rangers, I do have some sympathy with that, because, as you said, Councillor Malone, people are using green spaces more. These are not statutory posts, however, so in order to fund them, we'd need to do something else, or take something else away. But that's not to say that I have not discussed with officers in the past the issue of our green spaces and looking after them. So if there's any additional funding that comes forward from any source, we will be on it and looking at it to see if we could possibly do something around that area. And the last thing I just wanted to say was that in terms of the recording equipment, I think you'll remember it was myself who asked the officers at the committee meeting if we had enough recording equipment, and was assured that we do. But obviously we'll keep an eye on that, and if the service requires any further equipment, then we will look at doing that. But thank you, Convener, for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rendell. Councillor Flynn, I think you indicated.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Convener, I think I'll be supporting your budget quite clearly today, because I really have real concerns over the Labour proposals, notwithstanding the £750,000 one-off payments, but the near 30% reduction in staff training and our 50% reduction in adverts and publicity for the city marketing. This city has got to look forward, and we've got to be prepared for coming out of the pandemic, and not just sit on our laurels by cutting everything back with regards to selling the city, because selling the city will help the city at the end of the day. And I think that's got to be made clear. There's been made some other comments over this afternoon with regards to active travel within the city and our infrastructure. When I say that in recent last year, for example, we've spent over £2 million in improvements to the active travel network, whether it be 21-hour zones or upgrades to the Green Circular. Well, one of the biggest things was Union Street. We transformed Union Street, and it's worked with stakeholders ourselves, and the businesses have absolutely been welcomed this. This has been a sort of a headline for the whole country in some ways. They've looked at Union Street and seen what we can do there, and we can do better. And I think when it comes to the city centre, I think we will do better. So over the year, we've spent for this year in active travel on a variety of things, including the likes of Union Street, etc., from Sustrans, over £3 million. And we've also seen, as you said earlier on, Convener, about the £15 million was for spending on flood defences. And again, another £9 million coming from Scottish Government to support us with our Broughty Ferry to Monteith active travel route, again, via Sustrans. This is an innovative project, and we've got to be clear to the citizens that we're actually trying to do this transformation, and that transformation will continue. I think also, Convener, over the last year, obviously COVID-19's had massive issues with construction. But I have to say that the officers within the city development have done a fantastic job in supporting the construction industry as it's gone through lockdowns. And we've actually, the department itself and this Building Standards Service has passed over £90 million worth of work progress this year. And that's quite amazing considering the pandemic, to be completely honest. And I think, again, that just recognises the good work that's been done within the city by all the officers. We also down there talk about active travel with regards to construction. If you go down to Waterfront Place, what a difference it's making down there. This city is progressing. We're not standing still, even with the pandemic. We're looking to attract people to the city. And with the new active travel hub going to be taken over by the Angus Cycle Hub Community Interests Company, the bonus with regards to the national network will be seen when that's opened up. And you again, Convener, at the very beginning, you mentioned about the climate crisis and transport being a big issue and a contributor to the climate crisis. But this city is a way ahead of everyone else. Let's be clear about it. We lead the way when it comes to we have the largest EV fleet, and our innovative vehicle charging hubs are again talked about not just in Dundee or the region, but the country and beyond. And we're helping to reduce our CO2 emissions. So we're addressing the issues in this administration. And then we've got the additional HGV charging hub, the HGV one. First one in Scotland. We've got our new refuse vehicles. Just for the fun of it, we call Bin Diesel and Leonardo the Chargio. There's a bit of fun added to it from the kids of the city. And they see the benefits of what we're trying to do in the climate crisis and the challenges ahead of us. And Kavira, the ongoing investment in supporting EV, just an additional EV charging in the green market, we've seen an organisation, Ember, come to the city just because we welcome businesses to come to the city. We welcome the actual fact that we're using technology and moving forward. And to reinforce that, even today, Swarco, a major EV company, have just announced, and they've just been awarded actually, a contract from the Scottish Government to take over the Charge Place Scotland service, and we'll be running this from MSIP, again, another location you mentioned there. And yes, here in Dundee, and MSIP is a Scotland's hub for low carbon and zero innovation. So we see the benefits which we're doing going forward, and it's making massive differences to the city. So if I can finish, I know I've been going on for a wee bit long here, but I think it's important just to get across the message of what we're actually doing and what we've done in the last year. COVID-19 has a massive impact on local businesses, as we all know, the wider economy, hospitality, non-essentials, and various have had to modify their operations. There's been a massive drop in footfall within the city centre and in district centres as well. But Convener, since March 2020, again, you mentioned this at the beginning, it's very important we reiterate this. Dundee City Council have operated a number of business support schemes on behalf of the Scottish Government, and we've handed out over 38 million to over 4,000 businesses and self-employed individuals in Dundee. And this helps to mitigate the financial impact on them. And it's also, you said earlier on, there's going to be we expect another 5 to 7 million to be allocated by the end of this month. So that's in the lowest estimate, £43 million has been given out over the last year. So Convener, I'm going to support your budget quite clearly. I think it's important that we do. But can I just finish on saying my thanks to the staff within the department, the staff within the council, the NHS, third sector, because they've done a fantastic job, as many members have said, over the last year. And they should be applauded for that, although the pandemic's not finished. But I think to date, the job they've done has been absolutely superb. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Alexander, you've indicated.
Thanks, Convener. And again, I'll be supporting your budget proposals today. And there's a couple of aspects I think it's really important, and also to kick in to touch some, I think, of the unhelpful language and perhaps mischief that has been made in respect to the budget, because the reality is, as you set out at the start, this budget increases the amount of money spent on those vital areas: education, social work, and of course health and social care. And what our budget does that the Labour budget doesn't do is have specific funding called out for supporting the work of the Drug Commission and mental health. It also supports the work of the Fairness Commission specifically. We've also put in additional resources to support that transition to net zero, which not only has a positive impact in terms of air quality and the environment generally, but also is potentially something that will help the economy grow in future years. And you just have to look at the work at the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park as one example of that. So our budget calls out some specific themes, and I think it's been unhelpful, certainly in the narrative that I've seen, to suggest that there is any cut to health and social care, because that is not the case, and we have put in additional resources to tackle some of the city's entrenched social ills. I think we've been fairly honest, robust and clear on our intentions in that regard as well. I think there's also a few contradictions that I think are worth noting. The opposition members have referenced antisocial behaviour, and at the same time as putting in £12,000 for recording equipment, they're taking out £25,000 for a police analyst role. The same time as talking about the range of technical kind of rollout that they were referencing. We're cutting staff training budgets, and I think that's vitally important given the changed nature of many people's jobs, and I'm not sure that would be one that would be held in high regard by the trade unions either. Now, I would also say, whilst I think there's merit in terms of the specific proposal around providing iPads, computers, etc. for children, that's something that has already been acknowledged by the administration, and officers have been scoping out what that looks like. Now, it's also worth reminding everybody that we have ensured that there are thousands of devices have been released across the city. Now, one of the glaring, I suppose, inadequacies of the proposal, as I see it, is it doesn't take account of ongoing maintenance, ongoing software upgrades that might be required, replacement devices. It also doesn't provide anything by way of home connectivity. So it's all well and good giving children an iPad, but if they take that home and they don't have Wi-Fi, it's effectively useless. And I think we need to make sure that whatever we do is right and appropriate and takes into consideration those other aspects. So very keen to continue conversations around that. I don't think this proposal really is robust and doesn't take into account those issues, although clearly the administration is live to that. And just to say, I think there's always merit, as I've said several times today, in proposals that come forward, but our budget does exactly what we said it would do and reflects the outcome of the public consultation. It calls out drugs, mental health, poverty are the three main issues, but also climate change, and puts significant resources behind that, as well as supporting a really ambitious capital plan. And giving all of that, I will be supporting yourself, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Mara, I think you were next.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, I'll be supporting the amendment from Bailey Keenan, seconded by Councillor Malone. I think it's clear that we remain in the throes of this pandemic. We know that there are significant, severe economic consequences yet to come that we'll all feel right across these islands and certainly beyond. We know that we have to deal with education catch-up across Scotland for the huge loss of education opportunities for children in our schools, particularly those in the most disadvantaged communities, so many of whom live in Dundee, and we need to make sure that something can be done about that. But we also know that we've got a mental health crisis, frankly, that is just beginning. We already had a significant mental health problem in Scotland across our population, with undersupply in terms of the kind of staff that we need, the availability of services that have deteriorated over the last decade as they have been starved of the resources that they require. We know that this pandemic has added significantly to the challenges that people are feeling. We know that across Scotland we have 1,500 young people waiting over a year for mental health treatment. And we know that in Dundee, we have our social workers are receiving more and more calls from people in crisis. So one of the proposals that we have in our budget today, and Councillor Alexander touched on it there, was to leave some extra resource in the Health and Social Care Partnership. The right thing to do when you're in the middle of a pandemic. And also we wanted to make sure that we give the option for the funding to be delivered for the mental health centre that we have been promised. So we first raised this, it was raised by Labour with the First Minister in January of 2018. And we had, I thought, what was a couple of weeks ago, quite a constructive conversation across between officers and councillors on this issue. So I was absolutely dismayed, our group was dismayed, to then hear the comments from the IJB, from officers saying that it could be another 2 years before this facility is delivered. I mean, let's be clear that we have lost over 100 people to suicide in Dundee since that date in 2018, without that crisis centre. Now, not all of those lives would have been saved, that's absolutely clear, but some of them may have been, some of them would have been. So let's put in place that money to make sure that we can put in place that crisis centre. The centre in Edinburgh costs £400,000 a year. So well within the budget that we have, the money that we have returned into that and added on top of the allocation the administration has made. I have to say, I find some of the characterisation that the SNP councillors are making, not just of our budget, which we think is about the crisis and how we respond to it, but of the governance of the country. I find, we have one of the worst records in the developed world over the last period in terms of this pandemic. We have lost more people, we have had more infections, we have lost more people in our care homes, and we'll have to reflect on actually responding to that in a strategic way. I feel a little bit like, this was a picture, frankly, of yesterday that Councillor Finn was presenting, rather than the kind of tomorrow that we need to create. We need to respond to this, and actually the budget that we're putting in place is absolutely grounded in the current needs and the emerging needs that are coming out of this pandemic. I think it's the right thing to do. I think that the money that's allocated here is sensible. There's some criticism here that perhaps some of the money isn't recurrent spending. That we have to make sure that we can find that money. Well, this is an emergency. We're making the right provisions when we need them to be made, and we hope that they can be sustained in future budgets if the Scottish Government can support us in that. So I would move or support the amendment in Bailey Keenan's name.
Thank you, Councillor Mara. Councillor McCready, I think you were next.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'll obviously be supporting the amendment put forward by Bailey Keenan, and I'll do my best to not be mischievous in what I'm putting forward here. And I would say as a comment at the start, I think all of us are trying to do our best for the city here. All of us are trying to do what we think is right. To characterise amendments as mischief, I think demeans the person that says it. But I want to also say that I think, as many others have done, I think we need to recognise that we are setting this budget in the midst of a pandemic, and I think we need to recognise the great work done by council staff, by health and social care staff, by NHS staff, by social care workers, by all sorts of frontline workers, whether they're shop workers or bus workers, and who've done lots to keep our city going over the last year. And I'm sure just about everyone on this call has taken part in a clap for key workers. I think we should be clear that we want to deliver services and we want to deliver rates of pay and terms and conditions that suit that rhetoric of clapping for key workers. So I hope we'll take that forward in the future. I would also say that the pandemic has made clear the inequality in our city. It has made clear that far too many people in our city struggle to feed their families. It has made clear that there are many children in this city, who do not have access to digital devices, who do not have access to the facilities that might help them be with their education in these very difficult times, where they're working from home or where they may have had blended learning. And that's why I think it is important that we do invest in more digital devices, that we try and even up the situation in our city, that we try and give every young person the best start in life. We're committed to getting it right for every child. We need to do that. And in the current context, every child needs access to good quality IT, and that's what our amendment was trying to do. I think, as many others, Councillor Mara mentioned it, we also need to recognise that, yes, we're going through a public health crisis with COVID-19, but we are also in this city in a public health crisis around mental health and drugs, and we need to make a difference now. I don't think, as Councillor Mara said, I don't think that a 24/7 crisis centre would solve all those problems, but I think it would make a difference. And I think we've had reports, we've had meetings, we've had summits, we've had all sorts of promises, and all very well meaning. I think we need to see progress, and I think, as far as I'm concerned, elected members are quite clear that we need to see progress. It's slightly disappointing to read in the newspapers that were possibly wrong in our wish to see progress. I'm not sure that's how it's meant to work. And I also think that supporting Leisure and Culture Dundee is hugely important here. And when we think about some of the young people in the city, you know, I think this has been hard for those of us who are that little bit older. But, you know, when the year of lockdown has been such a big part of your life, when it's, you know, when it's been maybe a 10th of your life or a 12th of your life or whatever it is for some of the young people in this city, I think, you know, you need to recognise that has a big impact on them. Many young people may have missed out on trying new sports because most sports facilities have been closed, clubs have been closed, and that's why I'm very supportive of our plan to try and give credit with Leisure and Culture Dundee for the primary school pupils and secondary school pupils in this city, which hopefully would allow them to try new sports. And I hope some of them would just get a new, get an activity that they enjoy, that they can take part in for the rest of their life. And maybe even some of them could go on and bring fame and glory to the city by becoming, you know, elite sports people. And I think we need to make sure, you know, we need to recognise that some of that has a potential to have been lost. Slightly confused as to a characterisation that our dog wardens don't really make a difference in the city. I wonder if that is truly the case. If why those that still exist were not put up as a saving. However, I mean, I think we need to recognise that the quality of life and the quality of the environment that people in the city are enjoying is important, and I think we need to recognise that many more people are out and about enjoying the local area. And I think, you know, recognising just how lucky we are to live in this city. So I think investment in a dog warden and investment in countryside rangers would make a real difference. So I think, on the whole, what Labour is proposing today is a budget that will help us to recover from COVID-19, a budget that's aimed at making life better for the citizens of Dundee, and on that basis, I'll be very happy to support Bailey Keenan today.
Thank you, Councillor McKay, for these comments. I'm going to call Councillor Lynn, who will be the last speaker in the debate.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to clear up some confusion which seems to have arisen around comments which were made about it may take 2 years for us to come up with a mental health crisis centre. I believe the comments that were reported in the press a few days ago were in reference to a bid for CORA funding for a kind of longer term project to address the issue of substance use and mental health. So it wasn't in reference to the Mental Health Crisis Centre, which I have had a long-standing commitment to, as you know. And I regret that 3 years after the initial impetus for a mental health crisis centre, we don't have one. However, in mitigation, I would point out there was a wide-ranging review of mental health services within Tayside as a whole, followed by the pandemic, which has meant that we have been unable to start a new building-based or face-to-face service during that time. I recognise that as a result of this pandemic, that there are going to be more of our citizens who suffer with mental health problems, and the need for the Mental Health Crisis Centre is greater than ever. So today I can confirm that we've had further discussions, and I can confirm that we're very close to securing this. And in actual fact, I hope to bring a paper to a meeting of the IJB very soon to detail our intentions in this regard. So I hope that is reassuring to those not only councillors but people who suffer from mental health problems in the community, that we are on the case about this and that we will deliver. In general terms, I'd like to welcome the significant increase in funding to the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I will be supporting the motion, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn, for ending the debate on these very positive comments. Tracy, could we go to the vote, please?
The motion, as previous, is by Bailey Sawyers and seconded by Councillor Short. The amendment this time is by Bailey Keenan, seconded by Councillor Malone. Bailey Sawyers.
Motion.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Deputy Board Provost Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Cordell.
Motion.
Councillor Dawson.
The motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Lynn.
Motion.
Motion.
Not hearing people being called.
Willie, I think you may have muted the microphone again, your end, which means we can't hear Tracy.
Billy Roberts.
Motion.
Councillor Rowe.
The motion.
Councillor Ross.
Motion.
Councillor Short.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Bailey Keenan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Amendment.
Councillor McCready.
The amendment.
Councillor McCurvin.
Amendment.
Councillor Malone.
The amendment.
Councillor Mara.
Amendment.
Councillor Richardson.
Amendment.
Bailey Wright.
Amendment.
Bailey Scott.
No vote.
Councillor Hay.
No vote.
Councillor Scott.
No vote.
Bailey McPherson.
No vote.
Councillor Duncan.
No vote.
Lord Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Murray.
The motion.
We have 16 votes for the motion, 8 for the amendment. The motion is carried and is the final of the meeting.
Thank you very much. That's all the business. Thank you for your attendance. See you all at committees on Monday, and let's hope the next time we have a budget meeting it's in more normal times. Thank you all.
Convener.
Thanks, convener.